Good morning. Welcome to Talking Cannabis.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see everybody.
Hello. Ciao.
Hello, hello. We should have Sam joining us in a little while. He had a family event he had to attend. How are you this morning, Tom?
I'm great. Had a good night after some partying and wide awake, getting ready to go to see Michael Frank.
Oh, that's going to be a great time. He and I met 20 years ago doing an event called Spitfire Tour. Before he was as well known as he is now, he's always been a social activist, and this group out of San Francisco put together a group of actors, activists, and musicians. And Michael was one of the musicians, and we used to go college to college. We even did Woodstock together, as crazy as that sounds. Michael Franti and I did a Spitfire Tour, did Woodstock, and it was a lot of fun. He's got to be one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my life.
And I met him quite a while ago too, and he's a really incredible man.
Yeah, I first saw him at Reggae on the River about 20 years ago. I've seen him about 7 or 8 times. Come away spiritually high from it.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. You know, he's one of the few people that his art and is so purely full of love and acceptance and kindness, and I've never seen anything like it. He's one of, I'm lucky to have a lot of my friends, but Michael's always been one of, so proud that he loves me. If that makes sense. That he's really been an inspiration to everyone that he's met at any time that I've seen him meet them, and it's great. I think you're gonna have an awesome time tonight, for sure. Richard, how you doing? Can you hear us, Richard? Oh, you lost sound for whatever reason, though. We can't hear you.
I muted myself.
Oh. Well, how's Italy doing?
One of the rare mutings.
Yeah, you were talking about Italy. You know, you're located in Italy now. For people watching, Richard grew up here in California and started a hemp foods company over 25 years ago. That's how we first met. And he's since relocated back to Europe again.
Hell yeah. Perfect time, eh?
Yeah, of course. What's going on with Italy right now?
Well, it's undergoing a vegan renaissance, a hemp renaissance, and a hemp food renaissance. Hemp has always been big here. The oldest artifacts in Europe are found in Italy, fiber like 11,500 years old outside Rome. So it's always been big here. There's even buildings in Milan above the entrance. It says hemp for strength. So they're building acreage every year. Most of it's for seed and food. There's probably a dozen hemp food companies in Italy. There's probably about 8 hemp festivals just in Italy. And now it looks like tobacco might be the next thing here. I think there's going to be a lot of it's going to go to things called easy joint or marijuana light and smoking, CBD hemp buds for smoking.
Yeah, there's going to be, I think, a huge market, as crazy as it may sound, for low potency cannabis that smokes well, tastes great, and doesn't really get you that high.
We used to say you can't smoke hemp. Oops.
Yeah, you can definitely smoke hemp. Have you heard much about that, Tom? Are people in California growing hemp yet? Have you heard people talking about CBD cultivation? Are you muted? You gotta unmute yourself.
Yeah. I read an article this week. Someplace in California, they applied for a 2 or 3 acre field. But other than that, I haven't heard much.
There's a couple companies that are putting hemp facilities together in like San Luis Obispo and Central Valley, California.
Hemp is at a significant disadvantage in California from Prop 64. They require certified cultivars, THC testing, a lot of requirements that you don't have if you work with the university. And in fact, if you work with the university, you can grow anything you want, do anything you want with it, even GMO. And there's no THC testing, no certified cultivars required or anything. So if you're going to do any hemp at all, you should really do it with the university and really do something dynamic and not just grow, you know, Carmagnola or Finola or something in California.
I think there's going to be people that are looking at the protein market and the fact that EFAs are such a big market, and they're going to look at the seed as a valuable source of financial opportunity because of all the fact that it's, I mean, you even have Costco selling shelled hemp seed now.
Walmart, yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty significant. And when they're looking at it as an opportunity to make money, you know that farmers and stoners are definitely going to too. I've been using hemp seed protein for a quarter of a century now, and I'm glad I found it. Ironically, I read Jack's book, and that was the one chapter that I thought was absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
It just, the claims he made were just
Yeah.
more protein than beef and chicken and fish, and better essential fatty acids than fish, and it just all seemed preposterous, and it all ended up being true.
Right. Yeah, and more. There's cannabis in the shells that's a cancer fighter, for instance. So even more than we knew back then. In California, the CFA is controlling the hemp side, but they're not letting them grow for CBD. So all the CBD is staying with the marijuana side.
Most of the hemp production I see going on in California or a few other places is for CBD, not really for fiber, for seed, for anything other than isolated compounds, be it CBD.
Well, the reason that hemp wasn't grown in California until 2017 was because of the fear of downwind pollen going downwind to the medical grows.
Drift.
Yeah. Genetic trespass.
I kind of think that's part of outdoor growing. You're not in a position to really control your neighbors,
especially now.
So if you're growing outside, cross-pollination contamination is absolutely a real biohazard.
Yeah.
Have you heard people talking about that, Tom?
Up in Oregon last year, around Corvallis, north of Corvallis, there was a lot of contamination from a hemp farm. A friend up there said that a 4 or 5 square mile area got contaminated, and people were pretty pissed off.
I can understand why people would be, but I think that expecting there to be no pollen in the air when you're growing out in the middle of nature is a little ridiculous.
They're actually lobbying the legislature to make all the hemp farms grow in eastern Oregon on the east side of the Cascades, which sort of makes sense because it's pretty desolate and there's not many flower farms out there. It'd be a good place to do it.
They're thinking of doing the same in Colorado. They're talking that the zone out in the plains in the eastern part of the state would be for males.
Yeah.
Seed and, seeded fiber.
I don't know, did you, this is changing the subject, but read the controversy about this frivolous lawsuit that Eddie Lepp and Heidi Lepp sued a whole bunch of people, along with their dog, sued some.
Yeah, no, that's going to get dismissed. Not to sound rude or anything, but I haven't.
But one of their subsidiary churches is right out here outside Sacramento, and I guess the police showed up about a week ago, and the woman who's the reverend gave them all the paperwork that she got from buying a franchise, and as they were leaving, they said, "Thanks for the evidence."
Well,
and
I unfortunately, when I was in prison, Roger Christie in Hawaii, who was one of the first people that wanted to assert a religious defense, wrote to me very confidently and rather arrogantly and told me that medical cannabis was basically bullshit, and I should have went with a religious spiritual defense, and I would have been able to be free, and I wouldn't be in prison, and he could anoint me as a reverend. And I was sitting in prison, and after having cancer so many times in my life, you know, my initial reaction was like, F you, you know, medical cannabis is bullshit. And, you know, and I'm an atheist, and I just expressly annoyed with people that think they have all the answers. And I wrote him back really like just thank you, but no thank you, you know. And ironically, when I got out of prison, he was arrested for spiritual use, and they kept him almost 5 years without a trial.
40
And
months.
yeah,
No trial, no bail, very few visitors, 40 months.
very correct. And I felt bad for him, but I kind of always knew that he was wrong. And I mean, unless I hate to say this, but in this country, the only religions they've ever really respected is their own. And you know, to say that America is not a Christian nation, I think is quite naive. And I don't think anyone that asserts a Rastafari defense for cannabis or anything is going to get anywhere with the bigotry and institutionalized bigotry against cannabis that we face in the court system.
Are you saying our God made a mistake?
No, their God. It was their God.
I think
Right.
they're selling franchises for up to $35,000.
If
And I
anybody
think,
were to buy one, they're pretty naive. I mean,
right.
if you think you can buy, you know, the answer to cannabis prohibition in a box, you know, with a side of Kentucky Fried Chicken, you're crazy. You know, it's just so much more than that. And I hope people don't, you know, buy into that kind of preposterous crap. You know, buyer beware. If you're buying a church, do your due diligence, is what my advice would be.
The only one that might be able to push that envelope is Reverend Brandon Baker in Colorado, and he has the Green Faith Ministry, and he's a he's a paralegal, and he's prone to suing the state officials when they need to be, and he's advocating this, and he might actually be able to pull it off.
I'm not against, you know, anybody that, you know, I think prohibition has manipulated our lives on so many levels. And if you can actually beat it down on any level, I say go for it. And I'm not against anybody believing in anything as long as it doesn't harm the person or being of another person. So
Yeah.
I'm not against religions per se. I just, you know, I was raised Roman Catholic and that didn't work out so good for me personally. But
Amen, brother.
so trying to make cannabis a sacrament and then not justifying the prohibition or the lack thereof, I you know, whatever. I mean, to me, medical cannabis is a real legitimate source of therapeutic relief, at least to me, and I felt it would be to other people. I mean, when you get into spiritual use of cannabis, I guess it's, you know, in the eye of the beholder, in my opinion. What do you think, Kenny? Spiritual cannabis for you?
Mm, It's interesting. It's an interesting avenue to challenge the government with, as far as, but I've never seen it really go very far. You know,
I mean,
thankfully it did for Native Americans in some aspect for their religious use, but
They deserve it on so many levels. I mean, when it comes to things like peyote, it's real. I mean, you know, this is something that is indigenous to this continent. It's something that they used before, you know, Europeans ever showed up, and they
absolutely,
should have a right to it.
absolutely.
I was fortunate when I was in prison. I was invited by the Native Americans that were in prison to go sweat with them, and it was the most wonderful time I ever spent in prison. Was actually sweating with the Native Americans and Nicholas Sand, the guy that made all the Orange Sunshine. Um, and I don't want to say I believe in that. I believe in Native American spirituality so very much that I believe that what they believe, in the sense what they've taught me, what they've communicated to me, is beautiful. You know, their sense of respect for the land and all their relations and the way they honor every creature of creation is just absolutely beautiful to me. I wish that had been the religion I was raised around growing up instead of Catholicism personally, but I got stuck with being a Catholic. So, but when I was in prison, it turns out every federal prison has a space for the Native Americans to be able to hold their sweat lodges because it's part of their Native American traditions, and you can only be a part of it if they invite you in. So,
But the second part of my answer is, as far as like lawsuits and selling churches, I know nothing about what you're talking about. That's not on my radar today. Thank you very much. So.
No,
This is news to me. It's like, what? So we're selling churches for franchises for churches?
How about that Rossi?
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, you've been editing cannabis literature for 30 plus years, Tom. Have you seen many spiritual challenges win?
Well, my personal belief is spirituality is an individual experience, and when you try to explain it to somebody else, it becomes a translation. It only has meaning to yourself. And I get spiritual insight from cannabis, but I just don't see the selling churches. I mean, even though the traditional churches like Christianity and Judaism are businesses, and so they are sort of selling their business. Uh, I don't see that selling these churches advances our causes, and so I'm sort of I sort of see both sides of the story. But
I think it looks like hustlers trying to take advantage of naive people. So I don't think it's a good look personally, at all. I don't in that sense. And
My first
Unless you're
experience,
buying an illegal insurance policy at the same time, they'll agree to defend you or something.
my first experience with merging of cannabis and religion was seeing a 60 Minutes review on the Zionist Coptics, and they were talking about Star Island and Jamaica, and yeah, it was fascinating to me. They showed, 11, 12-year-old children with 1 ounce splits and stuff. And as a 13-year-old, I was like, wow, that's so wrong, but I want to be there so bad. And it was left just an incredible impression on me. And as an adult, you go back and look up that 60 Minutes, the Zionist Coptic Church, Star Island, everything they did there. Actually, they told the story on a independent film called Square Grouper, and it's pretty awesome story. Basically, almost owned the island of Jamaica at one point. Great story.
okay, I was getting people complaining that we couldn't turn up, they couldn't hear my microphone. So
I
just
can.
can people hear Kenny okay?
Yeah.
It's not like I do this for a living, guys. So if you could help us out, it's always appreciated.
Sandman.
Sound.
No, I hear everybody except Tom's a little hot. That's all.
mine's too high.
Yeah, you're a little hot. Yeah, but that's the only problem I hear in the sound.
But did anybody ever meet any of the Zionist Coptics from the Florida era period or anything like that?
I think it was in Carl Olson part of that.
Not really sure.
He's pushing the federalism challenge of Schedule 1, for instance.
Okay.
And I think he was part of that suit.
I mean, that was
The Rastas suing for medicinal. I think it failed at the Supreme Court level or something.
understand. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing to go back and look at that. I think I want to say Dan Rather did the report, but I'm not really sure. But yeah, very eye-opening to a 13-year-old child.
Well, I know it's, I have such a hard time with the whole age of consent thing because of the fact that I started using cannabis at such a young age and it was so beneficial. And I can't imagine recommending that to somebody else. But if your child has cancer, I would not hesitate at any age to give a child cannabinoid-based medicine. I wish in my heart and soul, my mom had found cannabis a lot earlier than she did because I was going through chemo and radiation for many years prior to her finally break it down and giving me a joint. And it was so beneficial. I wish she had given it to me a lot earlier, but it's hard to say to somebody, yeah, let your 9-year-old kid smoke pot because nothing bad's going to come of it. It seems like a very irresponsible thing to say. So it's a torn issue. When I lived in Amsterdam, at the time, the age of consent for cannabis was 16. So you could literally, on your way to high school, go into a coffee shop, buy some hash and grass legally, and after school, smoke it legally. And they thought that was okay. And it seemed like it didn't harm society in Holland, and at the same time, less high school age children in their society per capita were using cannabis in a legal environment than were kids in a legal environment here in America in the same age group. So that always made me wonder if it's just if you make something illegal, it makes it so very attractive.
That's what they found in Colorado when they legalized. They saw gray hairs like me coming out of dispensaries, and the teens started smoking less. And the ones that started smoking more were the 55 plus. And the day that they legalized recreational, I was in Denver and we were going to go celebrate, but there were like lines 200 long. And so I went to a medical dispensary, and in walked this older couple dressed to the nines, Sunday, going to Sunday clothes and church clothes. And they walk in trying to, you know, score weed for the first time since they were, you know, in college or whatever. And you know, it was just so funny to see that it was all these older people increasing and all these younger people decreasing, and, you know, all the fears of the prohibitionists evaporating right there.
Yeah, I think times are changing. I think that society is going to learn that cannabis is a very responsible, I don't even want to call it a drug, but a very responsible substance for people to use. I mean, for longevity over a long period of time, almost nothing softens the edges of life better than cannabis. Keeps you more balanced, keeps your head straight, you know, helps me sleep, helps me eat. It just makes my life more normal, is what I've always appreciated about it. And I think the more that it's legalized, I don't know, I think more people's going to also realize that. I don't know if that's real for you, but
I think what's also going to drive that is the realization from middle America that the cannabis is the lesser of all evils, because we're in the middle of a opioid epidemic in the United States. And I think the middle Americans are realizing that actual marijuana prohibition is the least of their worries. There's a lot of bigger fish to fry, so to speak. So I think that's got a lot to do with it. Yeah, is the pharmaceutical epidemic. I mean, you know, you're over in Europe where it's illegal to have pharmaceutical commercials on television, but
right. You know, even not only should it be allowed, it should be mandatory. So just in the NFL, everybody should be taking even sub-psychoactive doses of THC in case of concussion,
brain injury.
so to prevent TBI, CBD and THC both, and it shouldn't be just allowed; it should be mandatory for those guys.
Yeah,
I mean, I still play softball and ice hockey, and I've had like almost 9 or 10 concussions, and I've like cannabis. I liken cannabis to I healed faster. I don't have any deleterious effects from it, and I think that's why I'm still playing sports.
Yeah, they're even talking about banning headers in soccer up
Right.
to professional level because of that.
Right.
So I used to do something called asphalt snorkeling, and that's where you high side a motorcycle at a very high rate of speed, and you end up sliding on the asphalt trying to dodge the motorcycles coming at you. And typically the first thing that happens is when you hit your shoulder, is your collarbones break, and I've broken both of them. And you know, besides ankles, knees, everything else. And you know, at the age I am, even with the injuries I've had, I don't use any pharmaceuticals. The best I'll do is an Aleve or something like that. But, you know, when I go to the doctor and he asks me if I'm using any medications or anything else, I'm very proud to tell him, no, I only use cannabis. So that's
Well,
Just an herb.
last year we ran in the 420 games in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, and it was a fun time. Everybody had on their numbers, everybody was 420, and there was a Lagunitas beer garden afterwards, Pato Banton reggae concert. It was a fun time. I think they're going to have it again in August this year. And they got them in different cities up and down the West Coast also.
I said I use medical marijuana. I ain't running a marathon.
You know, I've been vegan 37 years, and every time I got an X-ray, the doctor would say the usual, "Oh, you must eat a lot of cheese." And you know, I got to tell him, "No, not a long time." And I think it was my bones were so thick because of cannabinoids.
Well, that's another thing that now science is pointing out, that CBD can aid in the healing of bones.
Yeah, bone knitting.
It's incredible.
Plus, it's a general anti-inflammatory. Usually when you got a break, you got inflammation and in that area. THC also, but especially CBD.
Yes.
That's why all THC should have CBD bred into it or mixed into it.
Well, yeah. I think we're only starting to learn what CBD can do. I mean, this is only the beginning of the research in all reality. I mean, we're only coming out of the dark ages when it comes to prohibition and being locked up for growing a flower. So now, once they stop locking us up, scientists can actually figure out all of the benefits of cannabis.
Well, and that's it. That's it in a nutshell right there. I mean, you know, according to Rudolph Bernstein, there's 88 cannabinoids and over 170 terpenes. We seem to be focused on THC, or THC or CBD, either version, decarboxylated or not. And, you know, there's starting to be a little bit of edge toward, hey, I isolated Delta 8 or this, that, and the other thing. I mean, it's starting to get pretty interesting that there's such a proliferation of people doing super refinements that we're starting to get super isolated compounds all the way through. And, you know, I mean, it's disheartening in one end that our industry still leads the industry in that, you know, we're creating these compounds that have never been created before, when big pharma and Mississippi, you know, all legitimate avenues have never even ventured into this, you know? So it's kind of a fascinating thing to me that we're probably going to figure out the uses for all of this before they do.
Yeah, you know, even in Wisconsin, they have a legalization bill, and it calls for a maximum 3-to-1 THC CBD ratio in the flowers or the products.
My problem with that is, like, show me some substantiated data that proves that that's the proper methodology. You know what I mean?
Or the proper ratio, because I've been advocating this for a long time, but I've said 10-to-1 or 20-to-1, not 3-to-1.
Yeah, you know, but even 10-to-20, that's a big disparity. You know what I mean? If you account for body weight, etc. I've got a friend that has a very rare eye disease, and I don't know, it seems like every time his blood pressure gets excessive, he loses a certain percentage of his eyesight because it destroys blood vessels in his eyes. Right. And he found that THC was beneficial because one of his friends gave him a cookie. And he said, wow, it really, you know, was incredible for me. And then they must have went home and said, okay, Ali liked the cookie, so I'm going to make him you know, I made him a beer cookie last time. I'm going to make a whiskey cookie this time. So next time he had an episode, he ate the whiskey cookie on the phone. And it's funny to see somebody like that explain their experience. You and I could say, hey, fuck, I ate way too many edibles, got fucked up and went to bed, you know? But he calls me and says, Ken, I had an out-of-body experience. And I was like, wow, that's okay. So here we go. Let me talk you down and tell you what you did. You know, you first had a beer cookie. Someone thought they were doing you a favor and gave you a whiskey cookie. You should have had half the cookie. But realistically, it's about the milligrams of the active ingredient. So I've had to get him down to that. He went and bought some chocolate.
One thing is, when people are eating cannabis, they're not getting high on THC. They're getting high on 11-hydroxy. That's what the liver produces from oral THC.
I think Todd and Richard or Ken are muted.
That's no problem. I say we take over the show. I was getting tired of Todd anyway.
They don't know that they're muted.
Well, let's keep it that way.
I think I muted him accidentally. I can't.
That is hilarious. Okay, everybody's like, Todd, you blew it. You blew it. I was trying to get the audio while you were talking with the people who were watching.
Good to see you, Sam. Good to see you, Mel.
God.
Well, for the love of cannabis. Can you all hear me now, Todd?
I can.
Yeah, and you're on. Sam, you're there.
Sam,
I am here. Did you all hear me when I just said that when you eat THC, you don't get high on THC? You
11
get 11 hydroxy, which is different than THC.
Absolutely.
Arguably stonier.
I love it. Mel Frank, is that you?
That's me.
I love
it. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Somebody mute Mel.
How long have you two guys known each other, if you don't mind me asking?
You mean
Sam and Mel?
Since about 78?
Must have been in the late 70s we met.
Right. It was either 78 or 79. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, very well.
You sound great.
Yeah. First I met Rob, and then Sam came.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody that's watching and helped me just fix the audio. I really appreciate it. We don't do this for a living, and you know, for all of us, we've been bringing information to people because for our own, all of us have our own reasons for disseminating information about cannabis, and that's really our whole goal here. And we're not audio experts or video experts or YouTube experts by any means. So please be patient, and thank you again.
I actually went to Oakland to meet Ed Rosenthal because of the book with his name on it. Then I found out that Mel wrote the book.
Well, that's not entirely true. Ed definitely wrote some parts of that book. He wrote the parts on, I think it was...
well, what I understood, he mostly edited it rather than wrote it.
No.
And flogged it.
We went over both of our work, our writing. But Ed wrote a good part of the outdoor and the drying section, and basically I did the rest.
Did Rob give him photos?
Rob?
I don't remember. So
all the photos were mine, including the photo micrographs. In fact, a lot of the drawings in the book were done by my sister, who's an artist, and also by a roommate that I had when I was in New York, who was also a political cartoonist. He did work for the New York Times, Newsweek. And in fact, my sister lives in Pennsylvania, right near organic gardening. And they told her that the maps that she drew were the best they'd ever seen, related to agriculture. So she was pretty happy about that.
What year did your book first come out? Your first collaboration with Ed?
That was in '74.
Oh, really? That early? Wow. I thought it was a little bit later than that.
When did Beverly and Sebastian at Andorra Press start publishing it?
Well, the deluxe they did in '77, and the little book, they took over the little book from Level Press, and who knows, maybe 75, 76. Really, I could never get anything straight from Andorra in terms of what they were selling or what I was being paid, that sort of thing. It was really
one thing you could depend on is they were selling more than they told you.
that was a certainty. That was an absolute certainty. Yeah, but it's past history. I'm beyond that now.
No. Well, you've always been an outdoor grower, though. I mean, that's been your main focus for as long as I've known.
Indoor, but of course I started indoor, and I've always grown some indoor, but mainly the indoor growing that I still do is all about breeding. It's just producing seeds, feminized seeds or just regular seeds. In fact, I have a bunch of little plants in there now. I have some haze. I have some thunk. and various other ones that I plan on working with. And then I have the ones outdoors, which are the ones that I'll end up smoking.
Some people really like punk, so good luck.
Okay.
So I got to take a break. I got 6 turkeys in my yard that eat all our plants, so I got to run them out of the yard.
Motherfuckers.
Fucking turkeys. Damn.
A very good friend of mine was an adrenaline junkie. Rode every kind of motorcycle, raced every kind of motorcycle. But then he had kids and he settled down and he got into bicycles and went over to his brother's house one day and he had all the fancy gear on and, you know, fancy little shorts, shoes, and the whole deal. Then not too long ago, after that, he was racing down a hill. Everybody came around a corner. My friend's laying in the street, blood everywhere, and basically went through a herd of turkeys, crashed his bicycle, and died. And it's just like, fuck. I mean, Craig was so awesome, and it sucked so bad that he got killed by turkeys.
Yeah, you see, that doesn't happen to vegetarians. I'm just saying. It doesn't happen to vegans. It just doesn't happen.
No, wait a minute. I've seen a lot of Indians in India killed that were vegetarians by cows, by traffic. Vegetarians die just as easy as meat eaters.
You go,
Mama
Dave.
Cat would be alive today if she was a vegetarian. I'm just saying.
But yeah, sucks to go out by turkeys, man. That's all I'm saying.
I say
some of your favorite cultivars
bacon
over the
is
years?
worth it.
Yeah,
No.
I'm just hoping Tom comes back. Is he going to get the turkeys or are the turkeys going to get him?
Right.
What are some of the favorite things you've been growing, Mel?
Well, I'm growing a sour amnesia again this year because the one I grew last year, and this is the same cut, I've ended up smoking almost a year. And usually that's what happens is you wonder which one's the best one. Well, it's the one you keep going back to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been going back to that one. So I've got that. I've got a couple of clones that came from Santa Rosa. A friend of mine, master grower there, Kelly, brought me because he's basically finishing up in Santa Rosa. They won't allow growing in the city, I guess, city bounds or something.
That's never stopped us.
So he's done his last crops for the Santa Rosa Medical Group. And anyway, he said these were 2 of the best clones he's ever grown, and he's been growing since the 70s. So I took them. We'll see how they do. Then I got a couple of I got seeds from the Emerald Triangle. Let's see, one's called Alien Orange. Another one's called Dragon's Fire. The Dragon's Fire is very much, it may be 100% sativa. Anyway, it's really huge. I managed to keep it under 5 feet tall, but it probably covers, I don't know, maybe about 50 square feet at least now. It's really filling out. And then I've got Thunk and I've got Haze.
And Jim, do you really feel there is any single one clone that is the best for everybody? I've never seen it.
Absolutely not. Right. No, I mean, you know, when you bring in the terpenes, they're really quite different. You know, and that we're just talking about the smoking and what you feel from it. But in terms of growing, they're all really different. In fact, you know, your haze I have in a hole that's always been the worst hole for me, and I can't figure it out why. I completely redid the whole soil mixture and still having trouble with the plants absorbing nitrogen. So I started giving them fish emulsion a couple of weeks ago because in actuality that they were a little stunted and slow to get going was okay with me because I didn't want their haze. They can grow gigantic, and I didn't want it to get out of hand where I couldn't take care of it anymore. So, you know, I've got it all bent over trying to keep it within bounds so that I can spray it with BT. That's going to be absolutely necessary. And I had one clone out there, one's from Santa Rosa that I had indoors, and I thought I'd put it outdoors just for a little while this spring to finish it in the sun. And overnight, I picked off 11 eggs off of it from, you know, the tobacco budworm moth. Laid it overnight. So, you know, I've gotten pretty good at recognizing them, finding them, And so that was it. I had to bring it back inside until I got a handle on this.
Well, if you could find caterpillar eggs, then yeah, that's fucking amazing. I see them when they hatch, and there's millions of little tiny caterpillars parachuting down on a thin thread.
Bungee jumping.
But if you hit little tiny caterpillars right when they hatch out of their eggs with BT, they're dead.
Yeah, I use it as a preventive. Once the plants start to get up there and they start to actually flower, is when I start using it. If I do see little holes in the leaves before they flower, I know that's probably caterpillars, probably budworms, so then I'll spray then too. But this year, except for that one I put out in the spring, I haven't really seen any. But picking them off, once you recognize them, once you see what it is, and you start to examine your plants, go out your plants every day, take a look at them. I've gotten pretty good at it. And one thing that I found is that when you find one egg on a surface, you'll find that just about all the eggs are going to be laid on that same sort of surface. Let's say a surface that's facing east of a bud. Then just about all the eggs are going to be on that east side. I don't know why that is, but that's the way it happens. And really, once you recognize the eggs and you start looking at your plants, you can find them. And I mean, I've done it. I've done it without a glass, but usually now I bring out like a 3-power magnet.
Well, Jim, you might be able to do that, but it depends how many plants you have.
That's true. That's true. And if you're plagued by budworms, I really think a screen is the best way to go. If you grow masses of them, I mean, I wouldn't want to have fields that you have to spray with BT all the time. I think a screen, because all you have to do is prevent the moth.
Exactly.
So you just
in my greenhouse, I truly cannot prevent them because it opens on the top. It's a 1-acre greenhouse. It opens at the top, and they come in. So do thrips. So do whiteflies. Yeah. So do flying aphids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to me, these are all the biohazards you just have to learn how to deal with as a good grower.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with Jim, though. Prevention is the key. Presume you're going to get them and deal with them before you get them.
Yeah, completely agree. But you mentioned you're in Holland and you get these things flying into the greenhouse. But if you go to Monster and look at all the high-tech greenhouses that are hermetically sealed, that are, as far as the eye can see, I mean, the ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure kind of sort of thing. The biggest thing is to sterilize your employees before they go in. Everything that comes in goes out, everything else. I mean, it's got to be a clean room situation. I went to a greenhouse up in British Columbia, and you go in, you decontaminate, you walk through a foaming agent that's got hydrogen peroxide in it. You put your hands in decontamination tanks to make sure you don't bring in tobacco mosaic virus or this, that, the other thing. I mean, that's the way it's got to take place. And, there's, specific size screens for screening out specific bugs kind of sort of thing, so it just has to be brought into us.
What size screens out thrips? I want to know, because I've seen screens that claim to do it, but I don't believe they work.
Yeah, I obviously wouldn't put all my trust in said such apparatus. I would do multiple apparatuses and filter the air multiple times getting in. I wouldn't just rely on something like that, because I'm in complete agreement with you. How does the bug know that it's too small or too big?
Well, one thing you can do is you can create positive air pressure in your entire greenhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to.
Bringing air in that is filtered and that's properly screened and filtered, and making the entire greenhouse overpressured, so really bugs can't get in, or if they do, you've got to drag them in on your clothes, your body, your hair, or your feet or something.
Yeah, completely agree. Over here we have a company called, you can Google it, it's called Eurofresh Farms, and you can kind of look at their plight from the opening page. It says out of business. But if you go back many years, you'll see that it started with 318 acres, the largest greenhouses in the United States, producing, I believe, cucumbers, tomatoes. And over the years, they got, they wanted to be organic and pesticide and herbicide free or what have you. 3 different repetitions of getting infected and going bankrupt, starting again, instituting new protocols and procedures. They have something called an EnviroLock system, meaning that employees pull into the parking lot, they go in, they decontaminate, they change clothes, different colors, and the 2 colors shall never meet kind of sort of thing. But
yeah. At GW, all employees shower, change their clothes, and then put on a white jumpsuit.
Yeah, but there's, even if you go look at that EnviroLock system, it's kind of fascinating and to me that an employee walks in one door, they sit, and this is in clean rooms all over, that they put their feet down, but they're not really, you know, clean rooms are not worried about bugs, but we're worried about bugs. But they put their feet, they put their bottom down on a bench. They take off their shoes, they take off their clothes, they put them in a locker. Then they pivot their bottom 180 degrees. There's a red line on the floor. I don't know how the bugs know not to cross the red line, but supposedly they know not to cross the red line. So then you put on your work clothes, then you go through the decontamination procedures. So even that behavior and their patented EnviroLock system, they still couldn't stay pesticide and disease free, and went bankrupt a 3rd time.
Wow. You know, I've said this to a lot of my friends and they haven't wanted to hear it, but it's don't show off your gardens. Don't bring people, especially people that have other gardens, into your garden, or you're going to introduce their problems into your garden because they don't even realize it, but they're carrying spores of powdery mildew or bugs on their jacket that they brushed on the sleeve when they walked past their plants on their way to come see you, and they didn't even realize it. And this is really how contamination happens, I think, even more than sometimes we get soils that have thrips or gnats in it. You know, but most of the time I think contamination happens just because we're careless.
A lot of people really don't understand that, for example, pests like aphids, when they are born, they already have fertilized eggs inside of them.
Right.
So all they are is basically an eating, pooping, and baby making little machine.
But at the same time, I mean, I think that we have to learn how to biologically control these pests, because poisoning our environment is not the answer. And when we're talking about preventive means, we're not talking about what like the dairy and the meat industry do, which is give all the cows antibiotics, where I'm not really talking about coming in and poisoning all of the plants. I'm talking about having a clean area, having good institutionalized practices so you're not unconsciously contaminating your place if you can avoid it.
IPM,
it's things like that,
integrated pest management.
Well, I'll tell you, a couple of days ago, I destroyed my tomato plants, which were up on my deck, because I found some spider mites on them. And, you know, I can't be having spider mites anywhere near me. I'm going to end up contaminating my plants. But one of the things I do is I really recommend people use Tanglefoot if they're growing outdoors. Yeah, that stops.
That's useful.
It especially stops the ants from spreading around whatever may have come on your plant. You know, aphids or scale. I've seen them do it with scale. You know, since I started using it, I haven't had any of those problems. No aphids, no scale. I haven't had.
You can also go after the ants.
What's that? You can also go after the ants?
Yes, correct.
Well, I have a great outdoors. I don't think I can stop the ants. I mean, I can stop them from climbing up the stalk of a plant, but that's about it.
For those listening, Tanglefoot is a gooey substance that comes in a jar, and you put it around the base of the stem of the plant, and it inhibits insects from crawling up the stem and infesting the plant. What's it made out of?
It also does not dry out, so it stays sticky.
It stays sticky forever. You buy it in a tub anywhere, really. Amazon has it for like $10 or something like that. And one of those tubs can last you quite a while. But, you know, I use the little kind of the flexible plant tags that people buy. And that's perfect for putting around. You want something a little flexible to go right around the stem. Yeah, that and BT is really all that I use. And the other thing is picking off infected leaves if I find any. I've had troubles with lace bugs, right, which I had never seen before a couple of years ago. And I found one leaf. I just noticed it right on a plant that had chlorosis. right? It was white in sections of it, and I turned it over and I saw these bugs I had never seen before. It took me about a year to find out what was going on, but those turned out to be the nymphs of these lace bugs. Lace bugs, they're called lace bugs because their wings actually have this transparency and this sort of rainbow reflection in them. It looks like lace. I've read up on them, and it says that they're not considered a serious pest.
I've never seen them on cannabis. Never.
Me neither.
Sam, I'm telling you, I had the year before last, I really had a lot of them. I mean, they were everywhere. And I was picking more and more leaves off my plants, but that was the only way that I had of controlling them because I wasn't going to spray anything on them. But yeah, when I've read up on them, it says they haven't really seriously affected like yields. So I'm not that worried about it. I haven't seen one this year, which I'm a little surprised.
Most pests you can control either by prevention or after the fact. There's a few that are really, really difficult, like spider mites.
Right.
If you have spider mites, trying to control them with natural controls, you never get every single last spider mites. Aphids, I've gotten every one of them. White flies, I've gotten every one of them. Thrips, I've knocked them completely down. But spider mites, it's almost impossible to get every single one of them.
Right. Well, you know, one of the things I did for indoors is I was growing on, you know, a sheet of plywood, and I put the plywood on paint cans simply to get it off the floor in case, try to prevent you know, crawling things from getting to them, just make it a little harder. But I haven't had mites in years. In fact, when I got some maybe about 6 or 7 years ago indoors, I was, oh, great, I got mites. And I just kind of let them go because I wanted to get good photographs of them all. So I let them do the whole thing. I let them web up, you know, take the photographs before I, you know, completely clean out the room.
I love that you saw it as an opportunity for educational materials for us all. Thank you for your enduring spider mites.
Well, I found some
over here, me and Rob didn't need to let ours go because we had so many friends with so many problems. We had more pictures than we could take.
No, I found an egg cluster on my plants last year, which I took in and I let them hatch and everything. They turned out to be stink bugs. It's pretty interesting watching them go through the changes, you know, from hatchlings to.
Question, you know, you guys are the great ones to ask. Someone presented, you know, how do you feel organics is going to work into the situation with large scale hydroponic farming? Do you think there's room for organics with large scale production?
Sure.
Any of you?
I'm not sure hydroponics makes sense on a really large scale. What, 100 acres, 200 acres? How large is he talking about? Hydroponics?
Well, there are really large-scale hydroponics facilities that make things like tomatoes, for instance. There's a lot of vegetable crops that are grown in greenhouses that are hydroponic that are not necessarily organic. I don't think
there's any really super large-scale organic ones. I think they're all done with chemicals.
You get a lot of clogging with organics when you start automating your drip system.
I know you do.
So, I mean, that's kind of the bridge. Obviously, that means there's a big financial incentive for someone to develop something that works properly but doesn't clog your system, etc. But, you know, if you're trying to go for ISO standardization or certification, should I say, or any of that kind of stuff, you know, it's going to be hard to justify taking, you know, live organisms and reintroducing them to your sterile medium, so to speak, you know. So there's kind of like the part I haven't been able to wrap my head around. But yeah, as far as like a true aeroponic, hydroponic, like Sam said, on a large, huge industrial scale, will be very difficult to achieve, and very few people do that. They do it in urban settings and things, rooftops and things to mitigate situations. But you know, that's not how industrial agriculture goes. But as far as like in greenhouses, absolutely, that's the way it's going to go. You mitigate the environmental dust, debris, you know, pest, disease, et cetera. But you know, then your first line of defense is prevention, and that means going above and beyond your standard hoop house, or it's got to be an ultra sealed greenhouse. And
I think your focus is for medical cannabis. For recreational, you really don't have to be quite so frickin' finicky.
I gotta beg to differ. I mean, when I really look at it as a product as it is, I mean, a tomato or a cucumber you can wash off. So say Eurofresh Farms could, you know, have a multitude of chemicals in their arsenal that they could have prevented their bankruptcy. We're not afforded 90% of those. We've got a very, very small pool of things available to us. So therefore, people say, "Oh, I'm going to be pest and disease free by utilizing predator mites." I really have to go back to: do I want the moltings, the eggs, and the feces from one bug, let alone 2 bugs on my products? I know that there's an acceptable allowance of rat feces in my ketchup and things like that, but it doesn't make it right. And I really have a hard time saying I'm going to release twice the amount of bugs to get the good bugs after the bad bugs. You know, I'm not saying that I'm going to go in there and proactively.
Well, the reason you do that is because the economic damage from the bad bugs can be total. So whereas the amount of animal or insect poop from the good bugs, I mean, you're talking about maybe for medical patients important, but I guarantee you for recreational users, they will never notice it. It's absolutely safe. That's what we've all smoked our whole life.
I don't disagree, but you know, from the perspective of now we're making extracts and we're trying to make them clean. I mean, you don't want insect guts in your extracts. You just don't want insect defecation in your dab. And if we can avoid that, it would be.
Then what you should be doing instead is making dry sift. When you dry sift it, any animal poop goes to the wayside. You only get the resin.
Yeah, then you get the legs and the things from the bugs.
No, I looked at it with a microscope. My resin is pure resin.
Just because we behaved that way in the past doesn't mean I want to behave that way in the future. I mean,
chance to be even higher quality than food, higher quality than botanicals, and higher quality than pharmaceuticals. You know, what other industry gives lab tests for every batch, the raw lab test, not just some disclosure, but the test. You can call the guy and say, did you really do this?
Still has a long way to go, Richard, when half of them are failing the tests.
Right,
Yeah,
but there's a protocol
here.
that's possible. There's a best practices that are possible.
Much more than half.
Doing this. And if we did this as a matter of course, like we're doing, but sort of made it a little easier and better, we would still have a bar much higher than food, which lets you have all that rat feces in your wheat. We'd be much higher than botanicals, which could be a little moldy, and it'd be much higher than pharmaceuticals, which are often recalled.
Most botanicals in America are also nuked.
Most of the herbs and spices imported into America are treated with gamma ray. Right, and for good reason.
Right.
You know, one of the amazing things that I've seen happen is the number of entries into these cups that get dismissed because they failed the test. I mean, what are these people doing who are, you know, bringing their buds or their buds or their extracts into something like the Chalice Cup or High Times or whatever, because they're going to be tested. You know, I think last year the Chalice Cup rejected like, I don't know, 40 entries or something into one category. That's just amazing to me. Don't these people know what they're doing?
Well, some of these cups have rejected 60% of the entries.
Yeah.
Steep Hill Labs reported that 84% of their samples failed for mold and for other pesticides and growth hormones and other things, plant growth regulators, I mean.
And 62% of the product in Washington state. So, I mean, that's quite a figure right there. You know, I wouldn't have expected the figures that high, but as Mel was saying, even as far back as Chalice, I looked at the failure rate in multiple categories and was absolutely fucking astounded.
Well,
I mean,
when you see all that mold, all the fungicides, all the herbicides, insecticides, starts making a little bit of insect from predators, not so bad.
Yeah, but I watch, like, in Northern California, we have, our local Channel 9 station like everybody else does, and it's got organic growing and things and stuff. And I watch these shows, and, this one the other day was about the decreased bee population and all this other stuff. And they have this organic grower out there. It was a major corporation that had bought a farm that was all organic, and they are transitioning into this. It was, kind of fascinating to me, how they operate and what they're doing. And what the guy said, look, you're not doing this, for genuine reasons. And he was like, yes, I am, and things. And they started explaining that, over the years, we've evolved into it, instead of spotting a problem and then taking care of it, we're being proactive and just spraying things like neem oil as a matter of course, et cetera, et cetera. And I've seen this in facilities. I went into a
neem
facility.
Neem oil is dangerous when it's heated and consumed.
Neem oil.
Yeah. Neem oil. Yeah.
You don't want to dab neem oil.
No, but I've been in
bad shit.
I've been in facilities where they spray it as a proactive, as a matter of course. It's on a calendar. On this day we spray this. On this day we spray that. It's just a proactive type of situation, and that comes from a thought process of some industrial agriculture as well.
It will also create populations of pests which are immune to neem oil.
Exactly. So that I'm looking at that kind of sort of stuff, and it's like, as you said, it's poisonous. Why put it on there if you don't have to? And that starts from preventing from the beginning. As you said, positive pressure, properly sealed greenhouse. I don't believe to go in there proactively. And again, to each his own, but I want to smoke the stuff I produce. So I really don't want twice the bugs, the feces and stuff. And it's not just my thought process, but I can point to big agriculture. And like I said,
well, if you're making extracts, I can understand that, because you're going to be extracting the bug feces. Whereas if you're making dry sift, the bug feces does not fit into the program. I have techniques where you get 99.9% resin heads. You don't get no feces. You don't get nothing else, because it's the wrong size, the wrong weight, it's not right. It doesn't fit into the system that I'm doing.
Oh, come on, Sam. I've seen those little legs slip through that screen a million times.
I totally understand what you're saying, but dry sieve is not what most people
You're wrong. I've got photographs of my stuff. It's spotless.
Yeah, I know.
But dry sieve has almost no market, in all honesty. In any of the clubs you go into, you'd be lucky if 1% of their sales is high-end dry sieve separate resin.
I agree, but that's because of the cost of the raw materials. When raw materials cost $100 a kilo for dried plant material, then anybody could make really high-quality dry sift. And some people are already.
Absolutely, 100% true.
Totally, yeah.
And once they scale it up and mechanized, I mean, yeah, I still maintain that scissor hash, finger hash is my favorite form of hash. I mean, it's in its most terpene rich state. I absolutely love.
What's even better, Kenny, is you take that scissor or finger hash and you make rosin out of it. Then it's killer.
Yeah, I don't know. I got a problem with the heat application.
Doesn't the entourage effect demand bug feces in your hash?
Well, you do get a lot higher, especially if you smoke bug feces in a bathroom, like a school bathroom. Then you get way higher.
Well, then
in a Pepsi can.
My next question is, does bug feces decarboxylate?
Oh. Acid form bug feces. Yeah.
I don't know, but I remember one year I went to a friend of mine's place, and he had outdoor crop fairly large, and he had caterpillar problems of various sorts, and they were adult caterpillars, which means they were pooping out little piles of poop on the plants, and I told him, you guys understand, because especially in the later stages of flowering, caterpillars will like corkscrew up a bud on the outside and leave it eaten out inside the bud. I'm sure you've all seen it. And I said, you do realize that if you smoke this caterpillar shit, you'll get twice as high as making hash out of it. And sure enough, I came back the next week and they said, man, I tried it. It was terrible. I just laughed my head off.
You know what strikes me about your last statement, you know, that I'm sure you've all have seen it, you know, and that's the funny thing right there is everybody here is a product of learning from their mistakes, and all of us here have made a million mistakes. So when, you know, people step to us and they say, oh, you know, this, that, and the other thing, your accomplishments and stuff, I have to look at it like I'm a product of all my mistakes, and I learned from my mistakes, and that's the beauty of it. And you know, whether it's Sam or Mel, I mean, being
that's
able
why that's why I know so much, because I've
exactly
made every mistake there fucking is.
Same here. I made them all after you. So, you know, that's the beauty of it, is we've all made those kinds of mistakes, but we learn from them, and together we can come together with an accumulative opinion, and based upon observation, that there's 100 years of observation here. That's absolutely amazing to me.
Well, the observation I want to pass to everybody is don't bother smoking caterpillar shit on flowering plants. It doesn't work.
How about spider mite legs?
I don't know. I've never had them with my dry sip.
Oh, they're fucking awesome, man.
Oh, years ago, I did smoke some spider mite infested stuff, and it just kind of snapped, grappled, and popped in a joint. Those little bug bodies exploding.
Well, I remember years and years ago, this was like 40, 45 years ago, we took all the red hairs off of buds and smoked a joint of just pure red hairs. Because we knew this was going to be the cat's meow. Well, it had little or no effect.
Right.
I made the same mistake, Dave. It was absolutely horrible. We took a record player top, put a pound in it, slid it back and forth, got the static, turned it upside down. As you said, thought it was going to be the cat's meow, and it was the opposite. You know, and that's, again, here we go. We've all done the same things. That's an amazing thing. You know. Right.
Yeah. No resonance stigmas.
Yeah, you're not. You know, you're not really
if you look with a microscope, you can actually see a little bit that got smeared on them.
That's it.
No,
right.
it don't grow on them.
Right.
I say you're not a real old stoner if you never smoked bong resin or pipe resin before, right?
Right.
I used to love that. Remember the little metal pipes that you screwed together.
We used to have something called the dry season at the end of the summer, where you had to scrounge and call every fucking person you ever met on the planet to try to get an eighth of weed. And when that didn't work out, you went back to your pipe and your bong and you scraped that resin, and fuck yeah, you smoked it.
I remember.
I did it once, never again.
Well, you moved to you moved to a pretty positive location too. You didn't have to. You went to your local shop, like we should all have been able to.
No, I didn't go to shops. I just grew tons.
In the 70s, in let's say July or so, in early August, when there was really no good pot around to buy if you were in the market. In California, you would find bags of leaf and the top shoots that they were cutting off when they pruned their plants. Even some male flowers you'd find in there, and they were selling this stuff before the actual, you know, outdoor harvest came in. This is before indoor stuff was any real part of the market. It was all outdoors. And then within the 60s, I can remember leaf coming from California. It used to come over on Gray Rabbit was one of the ways, one of those buses that went across country. And you'd buy lids for, 20 grams was a lid for $15, $20, and it was leaf. And it was actually better than the Mexican crap that was around. It was a little stronger than that, and it was all leaf. It wasn't like, 80% seeds and stems.
2-finger, 3-finger, 4-finger lids.
When I started growing cannabis, my friend's biggest put downs was,
You're muted.
You got
You're muted.
homegrown.
You're muted.
There you go.
Yeah, when I started growing, my friend's biggest put down to me was telling me that all I had was homegrown. So I used to return it and say, well, everything's homegrown. If you're in the home, it's grown in.
Well, it used to be called mean green.
Yeah, I remember when homegrown was a negative thing.
Absolutely.
Mel, I'd like to thank you. I was just telling Todd about this, or talking to Todd about this yesterday, about your Instagram account. I mean, it is such a historical timepiece to see pictures of yourself at 24, mid to late 20s, growing 6-foot incredible marijuana plants in the 70s in New York. I mean, your Instagram account is absolutely so incredible. I love everything you post, and I thank you so much. And that as the conversation started with Todd, was that you've got thousands of photos that are on film that really never got developed or even looked at because possibly they had flaws to them, and that you've got literally thousands of photos in your arsenal that you could now digitize, go back and fix and make them look proper, which is, and I can't wait to see those photos. That's incredible.
That's true. I do have to find the time at some point to go back and go through those. Because when the ones that are digitized that you see on Instagram are the ones I went through a few years ago and just picked out what, looked to me like nice photographs. But I left a shitload of them. I mean, really, there might be, I don't know, 5,000-10,000 back there slides that are, they're a little underexposed, or they have some part of the framing is not good. All these things that you can take care of digitizing. And so I have to go back because there's a hell of a lot more that's probably really worthwhile there.
I can't wait to see them.
Well,
I really don't have pictures. I really don't have pictures from before I came to the Netherlands, but after that, I've got an easy 10,000 negatives tucked away.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And at the time, I wasn't thinking that, boy, this is going to be great in the future or anything like that. I was just taking pictures for myself or for future books. I mean, it's so fortunate that I ended up taking a couple of shots of Sam's grow in Santa Cruz. I mean, otherwise, there's nothing of that.
Incredible.
No, I've got a couple of close-ups, but in my greenhouse in Watsonville, yes.
Sam, I wish you would share those. I would love to see some of those. That's amazing.
Well, I'd have to find them, and I mean, I've got a shipping container full of crap like this.
Well,
and,
hell, tomorrow's Sunday. No better day to start.
No problem. Next time you come over, I'll sick you on like a doll.
We're just gonna fly over and help them go through it.
That sounds like a dream to me, to spend a day with you on a Sunday, going through old memories.
I think after you've started the search, it'll feel like a nightmare.
I love it.
So you're telling me that Han Solo goes to Obi-Wan Kenobi and gets to reminisce about old times, and that there's a negative to that? I just don't believe so, sir.
Well, no, the negative is, I mean, if you want to look at 10,000 photographs, each one for, say, we'll just say 1 minute. How figure it out real fast. How much time does that take?
It'll take longer than that because I want to hear a story behind every photo. Thanks, man.
10,000 fucking stories? Give me a break.
That's a beautiful thing.
I am talking.
Like I said, that's a dream to me.
A couple years ago, I got to sit with Sam and go through his label collection, and he let me take photos that I posted on Instagram on my old account.
Todd's talking about underground marijuana brand labels that existed when everything was illegal.
Right.
And so that's just one collection. Then you get into the sewn patches of like DEA raid teams. He's got a collection of these as well. That's absolutely.
I've got 2,000 different ones.
That's
also, you've got the collection of the state tax stamps, right?
Then I've got state and federal tax stamps, every one except for one.
So how did you get them?
What? Police patches?
Yeah.
The only way that we belong to a club, the only way that you can collect these patches, you have to run up behind the cop and grab the patch and pull it off of it.
You do it after you smoke the caterpillar shit, right? And you get super
because then you got super strength.
How did you get the state tax stamps?
The tax stamps, what I did was I contacted every state tax office as soon as they were made available. And I was a member of the Internal Revenue Tax Club, which was, what's it called? The State Revenue Society. And so they tipped me off when one was available if I didn't hear about it. But usually somebody would send me a letter saying, "Did you know they're selling them here?" And to be honest, about half the states I got them from, I think I got them from 26 different states, the state ones I'm talking about. I was able to get stamp number 0001.
Wow,
Wow.
great.
Wow.
About half the states I got it, I was the first one.
That's
Well,
incredible.
It has to
Then
be.
there's the California Home Growers Association by Pat Ryan up in Humboldt that Clifton Buck has.
I won their Harvest Festival contest 2 years in a row, and then they banned me from entering.
Can we talk a little bit about roadkill skunk, because everybody in the chat is asking about it? And
I never called skunk roadkill skunk. That didn't happen till 10 years later.
but it smelled like skunk.
It smelled like skunk, but it was not called roadkill skunk. It was
Yeah,
called
but
skunk
it's-
number 1.
I understand. It's just people being descriptive, because when I was on the East Coast, when I started growing in the early 80s, absolutely the stuff that I was getting the seeds of smelled like skunk. And it's funny because once I started growing, one of my best friends, Paul, told me that now when he smelled skunks on the side of the road, he goes, "I like it because it reminds me of you growing our weed." And I always thought that's funny. But
The big problem with it was that a lot of people got in trouble transporting it, processing it, growing it. I mean, you could smell the stuff a half a mile away.
Yeah, I haven't smelled that smell since the early 80s, maybe about 82 or so.
That's because by then I had sweetened it up pretty much.
Well, I don't think I ever got skunk number 1 from you at that time. I remember growing haze one time, and of course the South Indians and the Nepalese, but I don't think I ever grew skunk back then. I think I grew it for the first time in the late 80s. You gave me some seeds in LA, and I grew some. That was just for myself, but
Yeah,
you know, I did grow some.
by the middle 80s or whatever, it was already, because I bred through selection for 10 years in California to sweeten it up, and then when I moved to the Netherlands, I used clones and did progeny testing, and I guarantee you that it was sweet then.
Oh yeah,
that's all that was coming out.
No, the skunk number 1 to me, every time I've grown it, it's been sweet. The skunks that I grew back in Oakland in the 70s, those came mostly from the South. People would bring me their stuff. And none of
If it was before 75, it wasn't mine, because I developed skunk number 1 in 75, 76.
So it was, none of those were ever strong to me, the ones that smell like skunk. And I did suspect that they had, now I suspect that they had a good amount of CBD in them. And that's why they weren't so strong. But yeah, I miss that smell. And I wish I had something that had that smell again. And I'd love to see the terpene profile on one of those things.
I miss it too. When back at 20 years ago, when I had my grow in Bel Air, I had a cutting given to me that was the original 1976 Skunk 1. And it did have a very acrid smell. It was not sweet. I liked it a lot. I lost it when the government cut down all my stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of people want it, but to be honest, I did not like the high as much. But I will admit, some of the skunky ones seemed a bit stronger than the sweeter ones. But I like the high of the sweeter ones. They're up, they're irie, they're what I like. So that's what I bred for.
Can I ask you, what were the different terpenes expressions between the
I
acrid
honestly
and the
didn't know,
sweet?
because I didn't really start studying terpenes until after 85, 86, 87, when I got a GCF ID.
Oh. Well, okay. There you have it. And what's the predominant terpene in the sweet-smelling Skunk 1?
I think myrcene is number 1. If you want, I can tell you, but it'll take me 1 or 2 minutes to find it.
Dun, 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 dun.
You know, how much have you seen cultivars change over the decades, Mel? in California. You've been a backyard grower for decades, literally.
Well, yeah, you know, these hybrid crosses, admittedly, they come up with some pretty amazing stuff in terms of the terpene profiles and the strength. I mean, obviously, I mean, there's so much of the stuff is over 20% THC now. So it's definitely gotten stronger. I don't know. The thing I miss is that I think the original land races just had certain unique qualities that I just don't see anymore. They just seem so different from each other. And now, you know, you do get different fragrances. There are definitely different terpene profiles. And now that we know something about it, you know, we can breed for those. But yeah, I think a lot of that stuff is lost.
That's what I was going to say. I lament the things we lost based on just laws, prohibition, lack of knowledge.
One of the things that the original Durban poison, when I was working with that, some of the plants were actually kind of purple in terms of the color of the stigmas, purple or lavender. You know? So that had all these different genes for the colors of the stigmas, because there was red in there also. And I haven't seen that the purple or the lavender color since then on anything.
Rarely see those expressions. Old school photos like you have.
Yeah.
Well, I have Granddaddy Purple. It's still a purple pheno. I still don't really particularly like it that much.
No, you're talking about the leaves. That's different than the stigmas.
Yeah, the stigmas, the hairs.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay. I missed what you're saying. Absolutely. And, you know, just to clarify, it's not so much that cannabis is stronger now. I've always argued that it is not stronger. It's been bred by humans for drugs in places like India for thousands of years. It's not stronger. It's just that now we have more selective clones circulating, and a majority of what we are growing are the best of the best and not the swag.
You also have
there was great stuff and swag 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Probably more swag than great stuff. Now there's more great stuff than swag.
Right. You have how many hundreds of thousands of people are out there crossing stuff, you know, and finding a pheno that's really good.
You know, part of why I think that what your complaint is that a lot of the people out there are just crossing stuff. They don't have any particular breeding goals. They don't understand breeding. They don't understand the genetics of what they're working with.
It also makes everything quite similar to everything else.
Yeah.
Which is the complaint. We've lost a lot of that diversity because of everybody just mixing together.
But also the trends that drive things. For a minute, purple strains or cultivars were very, very popular, and then Kush strains became very popular. Everybody forsook all those really nice purple cultivars they had collected to go to the next trend, and then came cookies and this and that. And
I found it for you, Todd. Okay, here we go. This was done in 1997, so it was quite a while ago. And it's got the terpenes listed in order. And I think there's 56 of them listed. So we were doing quite thorough testing, since that's twice as many as any lab will test for you today. Okay, so myrcene, number 1, was 71%. Alpha-pinene was number 2 with 10.70%. Limonene was 8.4%. Beta-pinene was 4.4%. Alpha-thujine was 0.80%. Is alpha-thujine the same thing that's in wormwood? I think so. Okay, linalool, 8.80. Caryophyllene, 0.50.
That's right.
Beta-phenyldrine, 0.40. Campine, 0.30. Sabine, 0.20. Menthol.
You're not going to go through the whole list. What do you think of the fact that the Laytonville Country Fair, the people that brought you the Emerald Cup, did the new contest based on terpene expressions as opposed to sativa indica?
Well, I think it's about frickin' time. I mean, obviously, I believe in terpene superclasses. I mean, that's what that's been my life for the last decade. So anything else is really minor compared, because what's important is, first of all, the cannabinoids, meaning THC, for recreational, and then comes the terpenes, and they fall into basic classes, as was recently exhibited by Mark Lewis of NAPRO and Ethan Russo.
So without
they
the
put out a
terpenes, the
poster
cannabinoids are
where they
just-
list all the different. That'll be publicly available very soon, but it's not quite yet.
Well, terpene modulation seems to be the key to really regulating the way the cannabinoids make us feel.
Everybody for years and years was convinced it was all the cannabinoids that created all these different effects for recreational cannabis. Well, it turned out that the only one that really gets you high is THC. Now, CBD does modulate it, and there's a couple other that modulate it a little bit, but they don't make it more recreational. Richard might disagree with me, but the truth of it is CBN is also psychoactive, and so is Delta 8, but the plant doesn't produce Delta 8. Delta 8 is an artifact of analysis.
All use is medicinal. Other than that,
well, I say stick it where the sun don't shine.
No, that's what Asoli says.
In a medicinal way.
That's a suppository way, right?
Yes, yes, his suppository patent. I had to make a suppository joke. I couldn't help it.
But the flavors of the terpenes are also enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think what we do is we learn that particular taste and flavors are going to have that kind of an effect. So we learn to love it. I suspect. I'm sure that people will say, who don't even smoke and are in the room, will say, oh, that smells good, or that smells bad, or that's, so to some degree, for sure. But I think, I mean, me and Rob, the first thing we would do when we got a bud is we grind it up, or with our fingers, make a joint out of it, and then dry hit it and smell it and taste it before we lit it. And the reason was very simple, is because we were able to predict, and also we were able to learn by doing that.
Right. But we do it with food. We all want to smell and cherish when we get a good meal.
We absolutely did it with living plants too. Before we had a GC, Rob and I would walk through fields and fields and fields of the identical variety and pick out what we felt were the superior plants, not only on physiological traits like, you know, the one that has the most flower to leaf ratio and et cetera, the most resin, the most whatever, but also on just the flavors and smells, because we had very strong opinions what we preferred. Is this the sounds of silence?
No, I think you're right. I think we, in a way, are the best computers, because we're the ones that have to use the product that we're breeding. I mean, we, you know, now a lot of breeders are turning to chemical analysis to determine terpene and cannabinoid expressions, but there still has to be that human appeal, because that's really the end user. It's not the computer. It's, do you like it? Do you like how it smells?
If you have that sense of smell and that feeling, and you're able to do that, in other words, subjectively say, that's going to be the one I like, and you have a GC analysis, that's when, you know, things really start changing. For example, Mel was getting some analysis done at Mississippi back in the old days. And the first thing we saw, which was shocking, was that the ones that we preferred, that we thought were the most potent, that we liked the best the effects of, were not the ones that were highest in THC.
Right. Hey,
And
Richard, I wanted to thank you for
we
coming
were a
out.
bit shocked.
I wanted to thank you, Richard, for joining us this morning. I know you've got to leave a little early.
I do. Thanks, guys. It was wonderful to talk to you guys next week. Eh?
Always
Yes.
a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Richard.
Bye-bye, Richard.
Bye, Richard.
Ciao. Ciao.
You know, I think the terpene conversations that we're starting to have now are really important in a way to the future of cannabis, because now we're really starting to understand the nuances of the different varieties. And in some ways, the roadkill is a really interesting topic to a lot of people, because it people would like to see it back. I mean, people would love to have access to the range that was once there, you know?
Yeah, well, sometimes I feel it's just a matter of everybody wants what they can't have.
For sure. And if anybody's watching this has a cutting of old school roadkill skunk they want to call it, please get in touch with me.
Yeah,
I'll figure out a way to get to you and pick one.
Yeah,
and copy
give
up.
it to Todd, and I'll come over and check it out and tell you what I think.
That'd be great.
You'll tell him he don't like it. You like the sweet one. I knew I liked the sweet one better.
I still don't like it.
Oh,
Right?
Yeah, but I can at least tell you, yes, this is my roadkill skunk number one.
I call it the Limburger cheese effect. I would never touch that. That's like torture to me. I would never eat Limburger cheese, you know, or blue cheese, you know. So, you know,
I can't stand it. I mean,
Yeah.
when I eat, if I try to eat blue cheese, it tastes like formic acid to me, just like if you're eating ants.
Yeah, so I liken it to if you're a cheesemaker and everybody's asking you for the past 30 years, what happened to the Limburger? And you're just like, I fucking hated the Limburger, you know, and they're just like, I loved the Limburger. And so I'm one of the fanboys. Growing up in Northern California, 80, 81, 82, I did get to experience what's in folklore called found on the side of the road dead skunk, you know, because that's
good. The good thing about it, I mean, the reason it was so widely known by so many was because it was the first seed company and it was the first widely distributed seed variety. So it really made it to a lot of people's hands.
Yeah, but it was also
And it wasn't advertised. It wasn't sold through magazines or anything like that.
Right.
It was like word of mouth. You had a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. That's the only way you got it.
But more than that, even in the sense that it was a consistent, fast yielding, fast harvesting variety that actually
absolutely
really well
true
indoors.
Yeah.
It could be grown in greenhouses, indoors,
Right.
outdoors, even in the Bay Area. Most years, no problem.
I don't actually know if the whole Dutch indoor cannabis scene would have taken off without Skunk One, because all those people trying to figure out how to deal with whatever land races they got their hands on, instead of being able to get that particular cultivar, because look, they then bred it into everything else they had. It is almost impossible right now to find any variety of cannabis that is not really, other than haze, that doesn't relate back to skunk.
Well, I think there's probably a lot of things now, but back in the 80s, mid 80s, quite literally all the seed companies were making hybrids with skunk because it was so freaking easy. Skunk was the dependable workhorse, the stud guy.
skunk, haze, and hash plant number one.
Well, how many can I, well, hash plant number one, well, you kind of just tossed me for a minute. Can I ask you, what were the Northern Lights? Because Neville obviously got his hands on about 6 Northern Light varieties that went into a lot of breeding.
Produced by an Indian up in the Seattle area, and I think his name was Greg, or yeah. And I met his son, and they were producing it for indoors under lights, and it was a strong indica. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I didn't particularly like the taste or the high.
Right. Well, it was a good plant to breed with. The NL5 by Haze is always been one of my favorite crosses or favorite cultivars.
Yeah, I grew NL5 times Haze times Sensi Star, which turned out to be a really nice plant. I really enjoyed that one.
Sensi Star I also like a lot. Had that leathery smell, that thick That
Northern
no,
Lights
I
was
missed that
used like
plant.
skunk in a lot of hybrids, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm happy to see though a turn towards haze because I
I
think
think
that
I
now.
even have some old hybrids of Northern Lights times skunk. But I don't think I ever grew them.
Hmm.
I made thousands of hybrids I never got a chance to grow.
Well, I'll be back to your living room soon. But
Yeah, but you've
you
got
know,
to
this
promise
is
to grow
really,
all
there's a lot
3,000 of them.
covered.
That was my problem back in Oakland, was that I had more things to grow than I possibly could grow. You know, just trying to keep track of them and just having the room. I didn't have the room for them in my little
Well,
greenhouse.
Mel, you should have come over to Holland. You could have rented the greenhouse next to me.
I know. It would have been great to work with you guys, but I just happened to get married at that point.
Yeah, well, you got to figure out what's really important, your wife or, cannabis.
Yeah. And unfortunately, my wife had just started a new position, so it was kind of tough to leave right at that moment. And then the next year, baby came, and then I was stuck here in the USA.
What are you talking about? I seen on the internet that you guys made billions of dollars off all this stuff. You telling me to have fucking jets?
Hey, you have to be quiet, or I won't allow you to use my internet. I do own it.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
The best one is how we made so much money on the sifting bags.
Yeah.
Those two. Yeah, Tom, what has been your favorite cultivars over the years? You must have seen everything.
Well, Rob Clark came through Corvallis in '84 and gave me Durban Poison. And like I've said before, I just don't like skunk because I got sprayed by a skunk about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Durban Poison that Rob had was via me, and I originally got the parents. I had to do a lot of work from Mel.
Right.
So you're saying you hold a grudge, Tom?
I don't hold a grudge. I just it turns me off. I mean, it took me 15 applications of a mixture of hydrogen peroxide, dish soap, and baking soda to get the smell off.
Next time, try tomato.
Doesn't
Next
work.
time, try tomato.
Tomato doesn't work at all. None of them work as well as what Tom just said, because I've had a lot of experience with my dogs and getting skunked. That works.
Well, it just makes me wonder what you did to those turkeys. I didn't hear no gunfire.
Right? I threw rocks at them and chased them down the street. I have an ongoing war with turkeys.
He chased them with a turkey baster.
Turkeys, squirrels, raccoons, ongoing war.
This is a funny conversation because I was sitting in Holland over 20 years ago with a Dutch friend of mine, and we were smoking some skunk, and he made this comment that skunk was just uniquely Dutch. It was just so Dutch.
Oh, yeah, right.
For a minute, I was like, have you ever seen a skunk in person? And he looks at me, really kind of funny for a minute. I was like, other than at a zoo or Pepe Le Pew on a cartoon, have you ever seen a skunk in the Holland? And he looked at me and he says, no, I don't even know. I was like, do you even know what a skunk smells like? He's like, no. I was like, you want to know why? And he looks at me and goes, sure. I was like, because skunk's not Dutch. Actually, it's very American, where North America is where skunks are indigenous. And it was actually bred in America and brought here. And he looked at me and he looked at the joint and he was like, no. It was actually hilarious.
And it doesn't smell like skunk right when you get sprayed. It smells like burnt onions. And it takes a while for it to smells like skunk. But ever since then, before then I tolerated it. I would consume it. Now I won't even consume it. It's just turns me off. But I grow sweet smelling.
Is that roadkill skunk or the sweeter version of the skunk?
Anything that's anywhere near skunk.
All it has to do is be named skunk, and you don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm all about the roadside. I'd own the animal as a pet if I could, just so I could get the odor every once in a while, you know?
That's funny. Yeah, I actually, after I started growing it, I had a different fondness for that smell of roadkill skunk. When I would drive by it, I'd be like,
I love it. I love it.
I know. And the kids today just will never connect it.
I mean, I only do flowery, or I have a bazooka bubble gum that just, when you smell it, your mouth waters thinking you're chewing bazooka bubble gum. And not only cannabis, but I grow Asiatic lilies that are aromatic, and anything aromatic I grow. And I think cannabis, when it's more legalized, is going to become, in the mainstream garden, a fragrant addition to the fragrant garden. You know, in the garden writer world, they write about fragrant gardens, and
But
it's
also like lots of color in their plants too.
and yeah, it's going to become a landscape plant. I bet in 10, 12 years, you'll see it sold at the big box stores as a landscape plant, because it adds color and depth. And I don't know if you've ever seen a plant called Cleome. It looks like cannabis. It has a big bud. It's sticky. It smells. I mean, it's identical to cannabis. That's got a 5 or 7 leaf, that jagged-edged leaf, and it looks just like cannabis. And
You ever seen a cannabis variety called Panorama? It was developed by Dr. Bocha in Hungary about 20, 30 years ago. And it's ornamental. It grows and it kind of looks like a beach ball. That's its shape when it's done. And it's fairly wide leaf. And it's got really, really low THC. And it was a registered variety, which he was hoping to sell as an ornamental. But he was never able to find very many buyers for it at all.
Everybody that wanted to buy it wanted to smoke it for some reason.
No, they wouldn't want to smoke it because it had very, very little THC. No,
Right. I was joking.
he wanted it as an ornamental, just for people to grow around their yards. Because at that time, it was legal to grow non-narcotic varieties of industrial hemp in Hungary. But then they changed the laws and it became like every place else.
Right. But here in the United States, wouldn't that be a wonderful conversation to go through with the DEA? No, it's just a decoration.
Yeah, but it truly was. It was strictly an ornamental variety. It had nothing to do with fiber, nothing to do with medicine, nothing to do with recreational.
When I was living in my house in Bel Air and I was doing my sex and selecting, all of my rejected females were actually getting used all around my house as decoration. So I had them in the elevator, by the fireplaces, around my desk. And when I got raided, the DEA was kind enough to write in their report, 2 plants near fireplace, decoratively placed. And they wrote decoratively placed probably 100 times in the report. Around desk, decoratively placed. It was hilarious, but it was true. Really beautiful houseplant, in all honesty.
Getting back to the skunk thing, I've dealt with chemical engineering firms in England. I've dealt with French fragrance manufacturers because, as Dave, a friend of mine, pointed out, that there's very little terpene analysis available in the United States. So I started working abroad, and in some of my studies, I romanticized that skunk smell. I started looking up, well, what are the chemical constituents of the actual skunk smell, and trying to put a correlation between that and the cannabis plant, as far as like, okay, there's that chemical and that chemical and that chemical, and here's the levels and everything else. But there's no rhyme, no reason to it. There's a predominance of sulfur compounds, this, that, the other thing. So it's there's no way, based on U.S. analytics, I could even get close to figuring something like that out. But it's certainly a puzzle to me that could certainly be unlocked with the right analytical. It's fascinating.
Well, what would really allow you to do it was to have a plant that you recognize as that type of terpene smell, because
awesome.
that's the problem. I've got this one here is my sweet one, the one I just listed off, but I don't have an analysis of the roadkill skunk #1.
It's like, you know, I think it was called Shackleton's whiskey or something. A gentleman went to the South Pole and lost a case of whiskey, and there was a big expedition to go recover it. Sorry if I'm loosely butchering the name and everything else, but the story is, went down, took the whiskey, took it back to Ireland, did chemical analysis, got the most famous nose in the world to come get it and stuff. And very, very famous individual, I think it was DJ Malling, paid to recreate it in a laboratory situation, and then got the best noses in the world. There's actually a show about this, and tried to recreate that exact taste and smell of that period of whiskey that sat for 100 years at the South Pole in the snow. So it's kind of a...
Kenny, you were saying about the different scent companies and stuff like that. Well, the analysis I just read off to you was done by Jovenel Rouge. That's who did the analysis for me.
Yeah. But amazing that I can do my problem is that I can do an isolate, let's call it. And they can never give me 100% quantitative analysis because they don't have the whole plethora of standards in their apparatus, so to speak.
Who doesn't? Jovenel Rouge does.
Well, anytime I got a report back from them, all the numbers didn't equate to 100%. So I always ask myself, what is the missing percent? You know what I mean? Just an inquisitive mind. But getting back to that Rudolph Bernstein paper, you know, I liken it to, as much as I know there's a millionfold that I don't know and will never know, because you get down into the fragrance and flavor industry and the romanticism behind that, and Burgess and the things that we make flavors and fragrances.
I just looked at this analysis, the one I just read you by Jovenel Rouge, and it is, you're right, it's not 100%, it's 98.71.
Got you. But if you look at the stuff by Rudolph Bernstein, the paper, the quantitative analysis of cannabis, sativa, whatever.
Rudolph Bernstein.
Yeah, okay. Put you in the last name.
Personal friend and colleague.
Got you. But states, you know, factual, that there's over 170 terpenes in cannabis. You and I can't get reports.
No, there's 151 that he's identified.
Yeah, well, in that paper, it states 170. So, you know, I can't get to that level. So without getting to that level, without 100% quantitative analysis, I can't really create.
The most I've ever found is about 65 or something like that.
Gotcha.
In a single variety.
And even then I have to ask myself, okay, that report, that paper was done when? And what cultivars did he use? Was it wet material? Because that's going to yield a higher level of terpenes than a dry material. Was it seized material? Where did it come from? How long was it stored?
What's the amount of terpenes? It doesn't matter how much there is of them. What you want is different peaks of different terpenes. So that, and the work that I think you're thinking of is in Dr. El Sole's I think it's called Marijuana and the Cannabinoids, and he has a chapter in there, and what he lists there is 151.
Got you. But you know, okay, let's take his data. But
I found 5 more.
Okay, let's take El Sole's data. I've got to question that data because Sue Sisley just got material from the university as far back as 6-8 months ago. I think January is when she got that material. I've got terpene reports, I've got THC reports, and I've also got fungal and microbial reports because I consulted on that project. And that material is absolutely horrible. I wouldn't feed it to, well, anything, any living organism.
Right, but Dr. Osoli creates it that way because that's what the NIDA wants, and that's what they pay and contract him for. Do you understand that?
I do understand that, but that means that when he grows that cultivar and tells me that he's got a terpene report, I got to ask, what genetics did you use? Where did they come from? They're not today's modern cultivars. They're not today's modern genetics. They're something that he's legally bound to grow, which if you look back in the Research Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences papers.
It's a Mexican variety.
It's all Mexican varieties. There's nothing is ever listed. There's only one Indian variety or say indica variety.
He's got plenty more though, because I've been to his facility in
Sure,
this
but he didn't grow it,
farming.
and that's not what that terpene's based upon. That terpene analysis is based upon. That terpene analysis
No,
is
it was
based on.
Renaissance work, the 151. It wasn't Dr. El Sole's.
Got you. So where did they get that material? Did they grow garbage material and base that information from that garbage
No.
material? Did they use?
Renaissance did thousands and thousands of terpene analysis of thousands of different varieties, some of mine included. And that's what he found, 151.
And that's an average given the so-called
No, it's the total amount of terpenes that he found in all of the cannabis. The 151 it's not found in any one variety.
No.
It's in
It's the average.
many varieties, all the varieties that he's ever tested.
And what years were that done? Were those modern cultivars? What material did he? How did he pull that?
Modern cultivars are just going to duplicate what their parents were. In other words, if you have two land races with a particular terpene profile and you make an F1 hybrid between them, they fall almost pretty much between the two. I mean, I've seen it many, many times.
Sure, but where did he get all that material if he tested thousands of cultivars? I mean, at the time that he did that,
he was getting them from Switzerland. He was getting them from me. He was getting them from wherever he could, including seized material.
And that gets back down to it. It wasn't some good, wholesome grower like yourself in Santa Cruz. Some of it was, but the seized material, we know that wasn't handled, stored properly. It wasn't fresh, wet material, certainly, which has got a higher terpene content than a dry material, et cetera, et cetera. So
higher doesn't matter. That doesn't change how many terpenes.
Sure. You're just going to have diminished amounts. I understand, but
that it still has the same number of terpenes. It's just in different ratios.
But they were old world genetics, not modern genetics. You know what I mean? So I'm saying that there's potentially a higher number than that of available, and certainly higher percentages.
More than 151, because we still had a few peaks that we did not identify, but. It's really simple. One by one, we just keep clicking them until it's 150, 155, 160, whatever the total is. And those ones are found in really, really, really tiny amounts.
And that was kind of my second rant, if you will. I look at the comparison tests of, multiple terpene reports, and all the ones that, you went down the list and mentioned, they're all there. As you said, everybody's accounted for. But it's those very little minute levels of varying ratios that really determine.
Especially if those minute levels are monoterpenes. Because, for example, when you make an extract, then those are often lost. The
completely lost.
Terpenes stick around much better.
Absolutely. If you do any kind of heat application, distillation, don't inject nitrogen in your process, you're going to get oxidation, conversion, a whole host of different things can take place. Absolutely.
Because we did most of our testing dry, but we also did some fresh, and we never lost a terpene. We just, the ratio changed and the percentage was lower. That's all.
Sure. So I guess the wrap up of my rant is like, if we had ever available terpene on a table and we did have that cultivar of the found on the side of the road, dead skunk, blah 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 blah, tried to recreate it. We'd have to start with a 55-gallon drum, because once we did, your main primaries, once you got down to your monos, the levels would be so low. And as we talked about those incrementals, those little bitty levels, almost unrecordable levels of so-called, terpene.
Well, it's kind of like music. I mean, when you have music, and you have an entire symphony orchestra playing the same piece as one or two instruments, the symphony orchestra will, in general, be better. It's this suite or ensemble of whatever you want to call it. It somehow makes the whole better than the individual parts.
Like it's into your digital and analog recordings. Something's lost in the digital version. In between the peaks, there was something that doesn't exist anymore. So. That gets into, if you tried to recreate that terpene smell, by the time you got down to number 170, the level of that 170 would be so small that you were putting into your, again, 55-gallon drum, because that's what you had to do to mix all those together. even then, I don't believe if you mix all 1/7 of those chemicals together in 155-gallon drum, you would really truly replicate the smell of that side of the road skunk.
No.
Well, maybe if you put it on some dried cannabis material that had absolutely no terpenes of their own. So, because maybe part of it is the burning, combusting plant material.
Right. That's a good point. A lot of us are used to what they taste like, smell like when they're burning.
And isn't it so fascinating that we know what we know, but we don't what we don't? And that's just incredible to me. That there's still so many variables.
I know everything that you don't know, Kenny.
I love it.
So when you're collecting ambergris from a whale, like, what do you do with that?
I don't collect it from the whales. I collect it on the beach.
I'm a straight from the source, dude.
But ambergris is a fixative more than anything else, isn't it?
Not really an expert in that. I've read a lot about it and the tales of it.
I'm pretty sure they use it as a fixative.
It's a fixer. Okay.
To make the scent stick around.
It last longer and evaporate in layers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
Sure.
Exactly.
You know, in your opinion, guys, what's the best temperature to keep a flower room for preservation of terpenes? Kenny?
Are you talking about during growing?
Well, obviously during flowering in the last 5-6 weeks of a plant's life.
I would say lower temperatures will favor more monoterpenes being present.
Sure, but then you get the
give and take. What are you talking about, like 22 degrees Celsius, 71, 72?
Yeah, I imagine some terpenes will vaporize pretty much at those temperatures. So maybe a bit lower if you want to ensure to keep all of the terpenes in the plant.
But there's a give and take for, each cultivar is different. How low of a temperature are you going to achieve? And what is going to be the detriment in photosynthesis, cellular division, and actual overall health of the plant? You know what I mean? So that's where you're
especially when you bring in yield and a whole lot of other factors.
Yeah. At this point, you're preserving terpenes, but you're getting 5 grams per plant. Fuck you.
Well, what temperature do you aim for in an indoor room? Flowering.
Well,
you can grow pretty much above 5 degrees centigrade, but they grow slow.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're getting a 5 gram harvest per plant. Good luck with that. You got a lot of terps, but
well, I see some of these people on Instagram with their greenhouses at 86, and I'm thinking, Jesus, you're like 14 degrees higher than anywhere I'd want to be.
I prefer 72 to 74 to answer your question.
Yeah, well,
we're in the same space. That sounds a lot more reasonable, Ken.
That gets into, like, I read an article recently, and we get into trouble with those Osoli papers. I think I mentioned this once before, that the gentleman stated that this Osoli paper stated that 1,500 moles and 86 degrees was the perfect temperature for cannabis growth. And I was just like, you're fucking out of your mind. I mean, maybe in a vacuum at University of Mississippi, you got more photosynthesis.
He was probably looking at what yield the most, the fastest.
I think it was almost not even that. It was photosynthesis and cellular division. Look, at this temperature, at this moles, these things divide the most, but that has no relation to quality or quantity of cannabis. You know what I mean? You might get the most rapid growth rate at that temperature and that par, but you're not going to get the most quality terpene content or growth of the plant, health of the plant at 86 degrees.
Look at wine for just a second. Mm-hmm. What they do with wine is they don't fertilize wine fields. They don't try to maximize the grape yield from each plant. What they do instead is they some of the best vineyards, they prune them back so they produce half as many grapes, but more flavorful, better quality.
Not only that, I was up at Nebaum Coppola, or actually it's now back to Inglenook. It's Francis Ford Coppola's place. I've got a friend that is associated with that, worked there many years. And I went to the back of the property because I could do that. And I was watching some of the guys out there with like regular hand rototillers. And they were doing a block of this vineyard. And I asked the manager, hey, are you just doing like a test block or something like that, just for a trial or something? He pointed to the whole fucking property and said, nope, we're doing it all by hand. And I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. There's 30 fucking acres and these dudes are out there just wearing the fuck out of like, just
why?
Right in the middle of it, just out there, just grinding away with those hand rototillers. I mean, just, you know, the hands-on. You have to know the history of the estate. When he purchased it, he put it up to actually do the Apocalypse Now. It was Inglenook. Then he turned it into Nebon Coppola. Then later on, reunited the whole property, and I think has deemed it back to the state, so the property can never be separated again.
Wow.
He tore down all the modern structures, rehabbed and earthquake-proofed all the old structures, so it was back the way it was in the 1970s, and then rebought the rights to produce Inglenook again. Moved all the stuff from that property that was Nebon Coppola to his new facility, and now that place looks exactly like it did mid-1970s for Inglenook, and produces Inglenook again. But now he's taking it to the hand craftsmanship out there with people with, you know.
That's okay, but I like the more modern hybrid Inglenookie.
Inglenookie. It really shows the value of a brand, though.
Yeah, and just that kind of love, attention to detail, and caring. I mean, you know.
Well, will they grow those grapes that they grew? Do they have that vine? Do they have that graft?
No, because of a proliferation of phylloxera, most of the old world vines in Napa Valley don't really exist. They were gotten rid of. They got diseased and everything else. And you've got to transfer things out. You can go some places for a novelty and see, you know, 30-year-old vines and things like that. But
if they still had it, Todd, they could graft it on to a tolerant root stock, and then they would be able to. But I don't know if they still have that vine.
Yeah, well, that's what they've been doing through the University of Davis, through the program established by Robin Mondavi for the past 20 years. So anything that they replant now is all grafted stock and everything else, because it's
also guaranteed virus free, and they know what they're doing.
Speaking of Mondavi, I got to leave and go there this afternoon, so I got to close out here.
Tom, thank you always.
All right.
It's such an honor to be talking cannabis with you.
Likewise, I respect and honor you as much as you me.
Well,
I don't respect and honor anybody.
Yeah, but you wear a red top hat, so you can't talk.
All right.
Thank you, Tom, and we'll see you next Saturday.
See you next week.
Have a beautiful day. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you, brother.
It was sprinkling off and on here, and we had an outdoor barbecue for a family birthday today, and I don't know what to say. Typical Dutch weather with liquid sunshine.
That would be a break for you. I tried to talk Dougie from Chalice to have you at last year's Chalice Festival, which would have been a nice reprieve from you, 120 degrees in the middle of the desert. I'm sure you would have enjoyed that.
Nada.
Yeah, that's what I figured. That's why I didn't bug you on it, you know?
Chalice is a fantastic event. I just wish it had a better venue. I don't really particularly like Victorville, but my hat's off to Victorville and San Bernardino.
They need to go to Monterey
for letting us have these events.
Fuck it, let's take it.
Monterey is a beautiful place. They have those auto shows, they have those golf shows, and yeah, Monterey's really nice.
Let's just take over Catalina Island or something.
Go take over. Golf carts for everyone.
Yeah, golf carts for everyone.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Things are changing now. They're talking about allowing cannabis in the country fairs. And you know what's going to happen when cannabis comes out of the counterculture and just becomes part of the culture. And suddenly you can have grandma putting her cannabis bouquets into the country fair, just like she does her pumpkins. It's going to happen, people, and grandma's going to grow better pot than your friend. So, deal.
I'm with Sam in Monterey. They got the world's largest pumpkin festival. How about the world's largest bud festival? I can't wait to see that.
I thought the biggest pumpkin festival is in Half Moon Bay.
Yeah. Well, it's still Monterey County, right?
No, Half Moon Bay is north of Santa Cruz.
Gotcha. You live there.
North.
I didn't.
It's at the end of the 52.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the San Mateo. Yep. It's true. It's way north. It's like almost an hour plus north. Depends on how fast you drive up the one.
Like you say, I live down there.
There you go.
For quite a while, man. I mean, so how much was Big Sur Holy Weed haze? Sam?
It definitely had haze blood in it, but they grew many varieties, which was called Big Sur Holy Weed. It constantly changed year after year after year.
Okay. That makes more sense than ever. You know, and this is the confusing part, because a lot of the varieties, as we were talking about last week, were named for the regions they were grown in more than they were where they were named for a
like
particular strain.
Maui, exactly.
Right. And they didn't grow through clones. So these, you know, every year,
Kona Gold.
Right, slightly different variations of their seed collection. Yeah, I so many times with outdoor growers in Northern California, they'll hand me a bud, and I'm like, "This is great. Can I get a cutting?" And they look at me and go, "No, man, that's it. I flowered it. I got seeds."
I mean, I made a couple of clones, but until I came over here in '85, we just did not use clones. Part of it was I foolishly believed, to be honest, that if you cloned cannabis, it suffered from a Xerox effect, and that a clone of a clone of a clone fundamentally was not as good as a seed starter plant. But it's just not true at all. What the problem had been was my friends who were making clones were making them from plants that weren't quite as good as the plants I had, so therefore I didn't think they were as good. But when you made a clone from a great fucking plant, the clone was a great fucking plant.
Right. If you select a great plant and then you clone, you're still going to have a great plant. You know, I got into an argument with a Northern California grower before that a clone would not be able to grow as large as a seed plant, and I was like, you just don't get how plants work, you know. But now that whole scene's changed. I mean, now you'd be hard pressed to find an outdoor Northern California grower who's not growing from a selected mother stock, making plants, and then pre-growing them and then moving those plants outside. So almost the old traditional way of throwing seeds out is gone.
Yeah, in Europe, even less people grow from seed. Almost everybody grows from clone.
No, seed, yeah, seeds. All plants started from seeds.
What they are using seeds for is auto varieties.
Right, and feminized, because there is an advantage to throwing out feminized seeds.
Yeah, but once you have a feminized plant that you like, you can clone it. Autos are really tough for most of the majority of the people to clone. There are ways to do it, but most people cannot clone an auto variety.
I don't recommend autos to anybody. Feminized are fine, but autos are, I think, not anywhere near as good as the plants that they
I've seen a few that are really fucking resinous and people swear by. But I haven't grown them myself, so I can't swear at myself. But they sure did look damn gooey.
The autos.
Yes.
It depends on the cultivar of the auto. I mean, when I was having this conversation with Simon, who owns Serious Seeds, he was saying that in his experience, the auto flowering have half of the cannabinoid expressions than the parent plant that they were trying to turn into the auto.
Also, too, the old autos were produced by Neville at Cannabis Castle, and those were using a ruderalis that he found on the side of the road. If it was a ruderalis, it was an auto variety, and the trouble was it would start flowering early, even under long photo period, but it never shifted into the final phase of cannabis growth, which is not flowering, it's frosting. The last few weeks, or 2 or 3, 4 weeks or more, the cannabis doesn't really produce more flowers or more biomass. It produces resin. And his auto varieties, his ruderalis hybrids, they didn't do that. They just kept producing more flowers, more flowers, more flowers, until cold killed them.
Right. Early Girl was not the ruderalis. Early Girl was a skunk cross.
Early Girl was just selections of early varieties from anything that was dope, and then they would try to make a poly multi-hybrid. I got it from a friend of mine in Northern California. I did not create Early Girl.
That's what I thought. Early Girl was brought over. That's yeah. You know, so you know, it's funny because when you look at things like the Sensi catalog, they've made a fortune out of mostly American-bred cannabis.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, yeah. The Haze, the Northern Lights, the Skunk, Early Girl, none of it came out of anything that they did. None of it.
That hasn't been a secret for 20 years, though.
No, it hasn't been a secret for 20
Neville
years.
did not create very many varieties either. I mean, he went to Afghanistan and got a variety he called Mazar, But I grew it one year. It was such shit, I never grew it again. And he dropped it after 1 or 2 years at the most. So what he was good at doing was taking other people's clones and making F1s between two superior clones, which is actually, to be honest, a relatively easier task.
Sure, right. Right. Because when Neville explained what he was doing to me, a lot of it was to just, mix together as many different things as you can, and then just trait the way that the genetics mesh together and go with the great ones, because some genes are just going to melt together better than others, so to speak, complement one another. So yeah, things like NL5/Hs is an excellent example.
You need great clones. That's the way. I mean, in America, the biggest way of producing seeds now is by using to make all female seeds. You take 2 great clones and you trip one of them to produce male flowers, and then you pollinate them, and then you've got these 2 clones, an F1 hybrid between them. And if they're 2 really great clones, the odds are pretty high that the children are at least going to be passable or really great.
Right. And totally. My thought though with that is if you're doing this with 2 complex hybrids, they're not going to necessarily put out the expressions of either of the 2 plants that you cross together. Correct?
No, but they'll probably, if you have 2 great females and you cross them, the odds are much, much higher than if you're just shooting at a turkey match and, shooting at unknown targets. I mean, the odds are much harder that way. If you're using materials that are great, okay, and lousy, then your odds of getting truly, truly great are, of course, lower than if you're crossing 2 already really great clones that somebody else selected.
Right. No, absolutely. I would love to see more people get into it with breeding intentions and actually start trying to breed together.
Now that it's legal, regular breeders, the same people who are breeding corn, tomatoes, vegetables, they're going to get, and flowers, they're going to get into it. And some of these people really, really understand breeding deeply.
No, for sure. Well, you know what, guys? We've been on a couple of hours. I want to thank you, Kenny, for always coming over.
Thank you very much. It's been awesome.
Sam, I could talk to you for the next year easily, and I hope to. But thank you, everybody, for watching, and tune in to us next week, and we'll pick up the conversation and talk more about cannabis. Thank you. Hold on. I'm going to click the button. Have a great day, everybody.